Do you need a break from all the election content on your For You page? Sit down. We're talking about this movie. So I just saw Heretic, directed by Scott Beck, and Brian Wood, stars Hugh Grant, Chloe East, and Sophie Thatcher. And Topher Grace, but I didn't know that until the end credits, and I was like, that elder looks awful familiar. It's Eric Foreman. I am not Mormon, so forgive me if I get this wrong, but I believe these two young ladies are on that 2-year mission that they do. I think that's what's happening here. Just certain things that they've said about, wanting to do this, that, and the third on mission, or feeling like they're not living up to what they're supposed to be doing. But anyways, they are on mission, and part of their assignment is they are going door to door, talking to couples, families, who have expressed interest in the church. And one of their assignments is Mr. Reed. Mr. Reed lives in a cute little house. And by the time they get there, it's pouring raining. They've been on their bikes all day, and they're soaking wet. And, knock on the door, and he answers it, and he's sweet, he's charming, he's Hugh Grant. And he invites them to come inside, and they're like, oh, that's so nice and everything, but rules, we have to have a woman present. And he's like, oh, no worries, my wife is in the kitchen baking a pie. So they go into the house, he takes their coats, and they take a look around and, see a cute little monogram stitched thingy on his wall that says, bless this mess, something you get at Hobby Lobby or whatever. And they get to talking to him, and it's interesting. It starts off very sweet and very genuine, and then it gets weird really fast. It's interesting when I think about it in hindsight, because at first I was thinking one girl was just clueless and just wasn't picking up how weird the vibes were getting. But now that I think about it, I think she did. But she is just so rule oriented. And, this is how you do things. This is how you talk to people. At one point, she's even rehearsing, how she's going to introduce herself. And, so even when things start to go downhill a little bit and when things start to get weird, she stays on script. Now you have the other young lady who is very logical in the way she approaches things. It's very interesting how these two girls are written, because they're very similar in that they share the same faith. How they express their faith, that's where the differences are, because you have one young lady, Sister Paxton, who is very much a rule follower and wants to do things by the book and do things the right way. Then you have Sister Barnes, who has this very logical approach, inquisitive and curious approach to her faith. Mr. Reed is a bit obsessed with religions. It's interesting because they're at his house because apparently he's expressed interest in the, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But he has a Book of Mormon that he's read inside and out, notated, sticky notes. And one girl, she's very impressed by this. And the other girl, she's just kind of looking at him like, okay, here we go. And it's almost like it's a challenge. He's subtly saying, you've met your match. We're going to leave the synopsis there. I feel like if I say anything else, we're going to give the whole movie away. I don't know how I feel about this. I don't hate it. It's not bad. I liked it. I don't know how I feel about it. That was different. It's definitely a genre film, very psychological horror, but there's an originality about it, something extra. Very cat and mouse, but in a very, intellectual way. There's something very thin about it. I can't quite put my finger on it, but there's just something very thin about it. It's missing an oomph. There's meat missing in the sandwich. But this film hinges on performances. Hugh Grant has been fine my entire life. Him and Morris Chestnut, it needs to be studied. But the thing about Hugh Grant, one of the things that just made him so popular, and I don't just mean he's a talented actor, don't get me wrong, but I think the draw of him, because he was such a draw back in the 90s going into the early 2000s, is how charming he is. He is so charming. And this is necessary to this role because he has to look safe in order for these girls to feel comfortable stepping inside of his home. And it almost reminds me of Pennywise the clown, because Pennywise, the monster, is not actually a clown. It's a shape-shifting entity. One of his favorite things to shift into is Pennywise. And if you remember from the beginning of that movie when he's with Georgie, talking about the newer one, I think the newer one displays this very well, where that mask starts to slip a little bit as he's trying to lure Georgie into the sewer. This is kind of happening here in that he's very charming, very sweet. He's listening, he's leaning in, absorbing what they're saying, but he has his eye on one girl, and you can start to see that mask slip a little bit, like a predator watching his prey. While I don't know how I feel about the movie, I liked it. I just don't know how I feel about it yet. I would say, for sure, absolutely, Hugh Grant's performance alone is worth the ticket. So like I said, this movie hinges on performances. The only way this movie is any good is if the performances are good. And all three key players here, Hugh Grant, Chloe East, Sophie Thatcher, incredible performances. Incredible performances. But Hugh Grant's sly, creepy, charming, sinister Mr. Reed, you don't want to miss that. I promise you, his performance alone is worth a ticket. And I'm not one to recommend movies. I try not to, unless it's like, you don't want to miss this. You absolutely need. I try not to recommend. I try to just give you my objective opinion and let you make that decision. But I will say this, because I feel very strongly about this. If anything, his performance is worth seeing. I want chicken nuggets. Now, this is horror, correct? It's not scary, like jump scare scary. This is the kind of horror that makes you uncomfortable and uneasy and forces you to think a little bit. I think maybe that's why I'm not sure how I feel about it, because there's a lot that's being said, because this is dialogue heavy. There was a lot that was being said in this movie that's just, it's got my wheels turning. Hugh Grant sets the scary movie tone for this movie because, again, he's charming, he's a predator, and he's just uncomfortable. He made me uncomfortable. I was uncomfy. I mean, aside from all that, it's well written, beautifully shot. Again, I'm obsessed with angles. The way this movie was playing with high angles and low angles. I'm a nerd. Ignore that. But I love that. Also, color. I love the way this movie is playing with, almost neutral blues and browns. The setting is also so important. There's something about horror movies that are set when it's snowing outside. This feeling of just cold, isolation. And then with snow often muffles sounds. So these girls are isolated, they're trapped, no one can hear them scream. Snow also has a way of covering things up and making things hidden. It's all symbolism, but it adds to the tone, and it gives us a way to kind of navigate the changing moods within the story. Anyways, yeah, I enjoyed it for the most part. I'm just like, maybe I just need to just sit and think about it some more. But I did enjoy that. I had my blanket with me, and the blanket was up to my neck for a bit at this point.